Welcome to the latest Peer2Peer podcast brought to you by Rayner. I'm Dr. Ben LaHood, your host, and today we're going to be discussing RayTrace, the system from Rayner that offers surgeons IOL calculation for the whole range of Rayner's premium IOL options. RayTrace has recently been updated, and I have with me two of the key people involved, two friends and colleagues. First, we have Sam Carter, Rayner's Head of Clinical Planning and Outcomes. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Ben.
Always a pleasure. Also, we have someone probably not very well known to the ophthalmic community, Dr. Damien Gatinel, Head of Department of Refractive and Anterior Segment Surgery at the Rothschild Foundation Hospital in Paris. Damien has chatted to me before on Peer2Peer podcasts, and today we get him on video as well, so it's exciting. Welcome back, Damien. Thank you so much.
Hi.
So, Sam, I might start with you. What is RayTrace? Like, really simply, like, what are we talking about?
Okay, so RayTrace was one of the very first online IOL calculators. It was launched back in 2008. We needed it because not just for toric lenses, but because we have the Sulcoflex lens, which was launched at that time. The Sulcoflex needs RayTrace to calculate. It's not calculated like a normal IOL. You can't do it on your biometer. So, but at the same time, we made it obviously able to calculate for our toric lenses. And then now we are 16 years later, we've got 350,000 calculations have been done. We've got 6,000 registered users, not all active right now, but they register, and that means that they can, when they log on, it's a very simple registration process, but it means that when they log in, they can see all of their previous calculations, which is a really nice feature you don't have on most of the other online calculators. And so yeah, it's been evolving over time. But now we felt the need to really have a really major revision, which is the RayTrace version 4.
One of the biggest updates of the system of RayTrace is the integration of Damien's PEARL-DGS formula and its AI integration that improves as more data gets fed into the system. Damien, can you tell us a bit about the formula and also how it's being integrated into RayTrace? Is it the full PEARL-DGS? Is it the full system, or is it a light version, or it's everything?
Thank you, Ben. Well, I think it's a full formula, because the formula in itself is a full formula. There's no kind of different level of the formula, and it is a formula which relies on linear regression and also AI algorithm. Traditional formulas only rely on linear regression or fixed model, but we use also machine learning algorithm that we have trained on a vast data set of post-operative outcomes. And using a supervised learning approach, we can enable the formula to identify complex nonlinear relationships between the biometric parameters and the refractive outcomes. So we account better, I think, for individual variations in the, say, ocular anatomy. And we hope that it leads to improved predictive accuracy, because the goal is eventually to reduce the margin of error in IOL power selection. And what is important, I think, in the formula, it's a thick lens formula. Traditional formulas also often simplify the lens as a thin optical element, and that can lead to approximations that fail to capture the nuances of the actual lens behavior. So we account for the curvature of the IOL, meaning the anterior versus posterior surface, if we have this information, and the thickness of the IOL, its refractive index as well. And so we think the formula can simulate quite well how the lens interacts with the full optical system of the eye. And also we paid a lot of attention to predict the effective lens position, the ELP. And in a thick lens optical design, ELP is a kind of a tricky concept, but we distinguish it from the optical versus anatomical ELP in some ways. And again, this offers valuable insights into how design parameter can influence the refractive outcome. We also did a lot of theoretical modeling. When I say we, it's my colleagues. DGS stands for de Bellemanière, Gatinel, and Saad. And so together we work on different approaches, and eventually what we try to do is bridge optical physics with the power of AI to ensure that every case would receive the most suitable IOL power calculation. That's what we try to do.
And Damien, everyone, the word artificial intelligence, AI, gets thrown around a lot lately. And, I tell my patients I use AI, but really it's just me choosing a lens. How does PEARL-DGS actually incorporate AI? If you can dumb it down for me and the listeners.
Yes, as I said, we use AI. We use also still a classic linear regression. I think to me AI is a buzzword because it existed before we call it AI, when we had those expert systems, where basically the AI is different things, but it has two dimensions. One is, instead of trying to model and guess a relationship between variables based on logics or linear regression, we use kind of black box, and we try to find a rule empirically speaking. So in some ways, the SRK formula, the one that got this relation between A, L, axial length, and K, with three numbers that I always forget about. But this was a kind of artificial intelligence because it was based on empirical data to find a relationship which makes no sense optically speaking. And the other thing is so today it was a linear regression algorithm, but it's to me part of AI. Today we would probably use the same approach. That is, we have a lot of preoperative data, biometry, and we know which IOL has been implanted. We know what was the refractive outcome. And we find a kind of algorithm in between that will be trained to predict the refractive outcomes, or can be trained also to predict the refractive power. That's a tricky part of the thing, can work both ways, but usually it works only one way when it's pure AI, because in real life you need to predict the IOL power, right? So you should train an algorithm to predict which IOL power would give that target refraction. And the way it does it, you don't know. That's, for example, the Hill RBF. It's a kind of a complex system where there's multiple layers of neurons that will perform some mathematical operation that eventually predict something. And we use these things in PEARL-DGS just for specific narrow objectives. In other words, everything we cannot model, like ELP, we have to predict it. Sometimes also the posterior surface of the cornea curvature. We don't use this keratometric index approximation. We use the total length, the total corneal power, but in many biometers, it's not provided as an information. So what we do is, instead of doing an approximation again, we train the system to predict the posterior surface based on the anterior corneal curvature and the thickness. Because we had a lot of pentacam data, we could use this to predict, again, in front of an eye where you have the radius of curvature, corneal thickness, maybe other information such as white to white. You can predict the posterior curvature. Once you have it, it's a predicted one, but it's probably better than a systematic keratometric index assumption. We calculate the total corneal power, and then we use this in the PEARL-DGS. That's an example. We also refine the physical index of refraction of the cornea. We believe that the 1376, not the keratometric index, yes, the physical one, is probably not exactly the unique one, and maybe can be a little bit adjusted. And we've done that for our calculation. That's the little things we do, and this is specifically where we use AI. But for the rest, we use thick lens calculation and optics. So I think the philosophy of the Pearl is everything we can model. We don't want to reinvent physics, because physics works well, we know that. Everything we can use to leverage our precision using AI, we can use it.
Could I ask a question, Damien? Sorry. It sounds as if, as with the other famous online calculators, that it's designed to accept the regular anterior K values and then work out everything from there. It's not expecting TK values or something else. How about with the post-LASIK function when you're using that? Are you still expecting anterior Ks or something else?
No, you in the current version, you just put the anterior K and we take care of the rest. Because if you do the total K, it will be compensated. It's already compensated in the current version. But that's a good point. As you say, this is interesting that the TK doesn't seem to bring a lot of benefits when we use it in formulas which were not optimized for the true TK. They've been optimized to get rid of it using algorithm. But specifically, sometimes some formulas, they enable a version where you can really use the TK, and that's probably a good point. Because if you have the real physical TK, total keratometric power, then I think that's the best information. But it's rare that we have it. And again, you must use it in a formula that was intentionally designed around that. But the posterior surface is interesting. This is something, for example, we do because we have a post-refractive surgery version of the Pearl. And since LASIK and PRK and even SMILE do not alter the posterior surface or just very minimally, this can be still a good information to use as a predictor of the ELP, right? Because we use we use the anterior surface curvature in classic non-refractive surgery eyes to predict the ELP, but once it's altered, you should not use it anymore, right? But the posterior surface still can be, and that's an example of what we do, those little things. Also, for the post-refractive surgery eyes, axial length, if you have an idea, we can even infer what was presumably the correction that was made, because most patients, when they come today, it's good when they mention lazy, because sometimes they forget, right?
Yeah.
When they do it, they usually don't really know what was the correction. And if you use AI, because we have so many eyes that we've done LASIK on, we can work backward and say, okay, this is a post-op LASIK eye. Can you predict what was the correction applied? And there are many things, like the thickness can be an element. Of course, the anterior surface curvature, also the posterior, because the posterior can be related to the anterior, statistically speaking. So if there is a mismatch, it can be what the laser actually has done to the cornea, etc., etc. And so you can have a kind of historical element out of the fog to be used to better predict the ELP, even the corneal power, etc., etc. So there's a lot of little information you can gather here and there to perform better prediction and refine your formula in those specific situations. And we also use an option which is a second eye. Again, it's typically when you have one eye operated, you know everything. It's the same patient, but it's now the second eye. There's, statistically speaking, a lot of probability that the first eye may influence the second eye outcome. So we can use this information to refine the prediction of the Pearl formula. This is called second eye. And I think it's a good tool also, especially when you had a refractive surprise, to maybe avoid it in a second time.
That's awesome. And so will RayTrace be able to incorporate SAM with Ray Pro? Because Damien's talking a lot about collecting existing data, refractive outcomes, and then using that to refine your prediction for the next eye. Will the two be linked together, those two Rayner technologies?
Yeah, so that is one of the the many new features with version 4 is you'll be very simply able to add a patient to the RayPro system. So you just put in their email address once you've got their permission, of course, and then they will get periodic 6 different email questionnaires. No free writing required, just very fast tick box questionnaires over the next 3 years. and this happens automatically. You can find out lots of useful information, both from a business point of view and from an outcomes point of view with that. And on the outcomes side, apart from linking to RayPro, there will be a function where you can record the clinical outcomes, the visual outcomes, defocus curves, whatever you want for each patient you calculate on RayTrace. It'll be linked to their original calculation, and then you can put the outcomes data in as you get it over the coming months, and then you can export it in a file, and you've basically done a lens evaluation with all within the system, and you can evaluate not only Rayner lenses, and this goes for RayPro as well. I should probably mention some of the other changes with the new version, which I didn't mention earlier, which is for ease of use, you can now choose to enter both eyes simultaneously or one eye at once.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice being able to look at one eye and the other at the same time.
You also, another thing that I haven't seen with other calculators, which I specifically asked for because I think it's really useful if you've got anything unusual about that patient's eye, anything you want to remember about that patient when you're in theatre. We have a nice, newly designed, very clear theatre view with a really nice big image of the lens and the axis. But there's also, you can also enter freehand text into RayTrace, and that will appear on that printout. So it'll be right there, stuck to your microscope. Any notes you want to make about that patient, the procedure, anything to remember, it will be there. And instead of maybe tucked away in the notes or in an email.
That's great. That's really nice. Good practical updates. Damien, when I told my colleagues that I was going to be talking to you about PEARL-DGS, they really wanted to hear from the expert. I feel like you might say that you'd use PEARL-DGS for every eye, but are there any specific situations where you would say PEARL-DGS trumps other options out there? Is it short eyes, or is it long eyes, or, irregular eyes? Is there any sort of particular situation that you thought when you and your colleagues were making PEARL-DGS that you thought this is going to be an all-round formula, or was it to fill a particular gap?
Well, no, we wanted to address all situations, of course. Based on external evaluation, I think the feedback initially was that we did particularly well for short eyes. There are a couple of, or maybe more than that now, papers that suggest that in very short eye, PEARL-DGS performs well. That's, I think, the reflection of the attention we gave to the ELP prediction, because this is also some work we've done, and we are proud of that. We came with a formula that tells you what is the refractive error that would be induced by a specific ELP error. And the formula shows that this is proportional to the square of the IOL power. So if you compare the square of, let's say, 5 diopters, which is 25, to 30 diopters, which is around to 900, you can really realize that in short eyes, where we use high power lenses, any ELP, you will pay a big price if you have a ELP error, prediction error. And we seem to have a good results with those eyes. In long eyes, we were not as good. And the most formulas today can enable to reach about 90% of eyes within a prediction error of half a diopters. But again, the results are worse in short and long eyes. So in short eyes, we do well. In long eyes, we have improved recently. I think in long eyes, the error comes from an accurate axial length evaluation. And there are now things we have incorporated, such as sum of segments or Cook modified axial length implementation. And that's maybe an improvement. The important sources of error are still the post-op ELP prediction. Also, sometimes people do not refract well, so post-op refraction can be an error. Of course, axial length, keratometry, IOL power, and that's echoing the importance of ray tracing when you have the actual design. And I'm sure Rayner knows what they design, so they can use accurate ray tracing, because when you ray trace, you have to to follow light rays that hit every surfaces of the eye. So when you reach the IOL, it's better to know where it hits, which is the actual curvature and radius of curvature to perform accurate calculation. And we also have errors arising from the optical biometers. So it's not always the fault of the formula in some ways. One of the challenge today is, again, to incorporate lens design, which can be extended not only to anterior versus posterior IOL surface power, but also to asphericity, because we have done some work with my colleague Benjamin Stern with an instrument that measures IOL very precisely and then enables you to do simulations for specific corneas that have different asphericities, like echoing what you would find after a post-LASIK eye, a very positive Q value, very positive spherical aberration, and a variable range of pupil power. And we find that for a same 21 dioptric power IOL, in some eyes, it will induce a myopic refractive surprise because of the cornea sphericity, which was not taken into account, and maybe a specific larger pupil diameter. So I think pupil size, corneal sphericity are also the next game changers, especially when you address EDOF IOLs, where spherical aberration is used to extend the depth of focus. These IOLs have been conceived in normal eyes, but if you now place them in a altered eye with an altered cornea because of refractive surgery, or just because this eye is a bit an alien in terms of the biometric data, then you may not expect the outcome you may have could be surprising. Typically, if you use, for example, negatively aberrated EDOF lenses and you put them in an eye where the corneal spherical aberration is a bit more positive, the lens will not behave anymore like an EDOF lens, but the balance between the corneal and the lens-induced spherical aberration will result in a kind of monofocal result, and that can be disappointing for the patient who would expect a bit more depth of field. So there's a lot of work to do, of course, in the formulas, but around them. And we have published some letters to the editor with colleagues of mine that are very prominent in the field of IOL power calculation to demand that IOL manufacturers reveal part of their design to improve IOL power calculation. I think that would be really the key in the future to improve, especially with those new premium or monofocal plus, etc. range IOLs. That could be very important. So we need to know more about intraocular lens design.
And Damien, do you think that we're headed towards surgeons needing biometers that do give a sum of segments within the axial length, and people needing to measure aberrations to get the best out of their IOL selections?
Sure. The more precise the pre-op biometer information collection, the better will be the result. I know you like fashion. It's like if you go and buy a suit, you'll be pleased if in a store, and I think in London, they know exactly what I'm speaking about. The tailor will come and measure exactly everything in your body. So when you get the suit, it's matching your body dimensions, right? And of course, today we are in an in-between situation. We are like moving from this, give me like a size 40 to give me size 40, but can you make the sleeve a bit longer? All right. But sometimes even my arm, I notice my sleeves are usually looking shorter on my left arm. I don't still know why, but that's an example. And I think for IOL calculations, that could be really important, that in the future we have the possibility of, as you said, measuring corneal aberrations and find which IOL matches this specific situation better to provide that expected performance. So we are still in the infancy of it, but this is our priority in my department to move forward those direction of customization of the IOL selection, IOL power selection, etc., etc. And I'm sure with partners like Raina, we can really have the opportunity to develop such thing.
Damien,
Yeah, that's awesome.
sorry, I was just going to jump in and ask. Do you think in the near future that the calculators in Pearl will ask every time what the biometer was that was used? Because obviously there's lots of published data now showing that they measure slightly different axial lengths on the different methods that they use, and certainly different K values with some of the newer biometers. And I'm seeing more and more calculations using different newer biometry devices. We're comparing apples and pears a little bit. We're putting them all into the same formula, even though we know that probably there should be some adjustment there.
Yeah, right. That's a very interesting domain, and one of the research I'm doing now is trying to evaluate what is the consequence of a biometer error in terms not only of mean prediction, that is kind of average offset you may have. Suppose you have an IOL, a biometer, which works well in your department, then you buy a new one. And as you said, the new one does not measure axial lengths or keratometry exactly as you were doing before. You may expect a shift in your average error, but also you need to figure out that the mean can be changed with constant adjustment. I'm not recommending that for biometer fixing, but that's what people would do. And that would also influence the standard deviation of the error. Like if you have a keratometric error with a new biometer, it's easy to fix if you just alter the target refraction to incorporate that error. But you must be sure that this error comes from the cornea. What if it comes from the axial length? What you will see is just a deviation of the error mean value and of the standard deviation. And the point is that in simple ways, and we published that, when you have positional errors, it's nice to fix them with a constant adjustment, because constant adjustments are working on the ELP prediction by a specific offset. But if you have keratometric errors, you should not do that, because if you do this, you will change the location of IOLs to match, to make your mean prediction 0 in terms of value. But because of this relation with the square power of the IOL, you will change tremendously the results from short eyes to long eyes. And the price to pay is that although you will compensate your mean error, that is the mean prediction error, you will increase the spread of your error throughout the IOL power range in your data sample. So all these little things are very interesting to study. It's very tricky. And again, it's also very important to realize that medicine evolves not like science in some ways, because what you need is pragmatically, to get good results, right? So you would not sacrifice your results on the sake of the science. That is, my biometer measures the true K, but it induces errors because my formula is built on a previous wrong K assumption. Of course, what people do, even in the industry of topography biometry, is try to align with what was the gold standard before, although this gold standard may be erroneous with regards to the actual scientific true value. And it's very difficult to match all these things, because again, when you discuss, I work as a consultant for different manufacturers, and they say, oh, we compared our keratometry to the previous gold standard one, and we have an offset. And I tell them, well, you should keep it and move around it so you can fix formulas to match your keratometry. But they say, yeah, but it's impossible, because IOL power designers, IOL power formula designers may not want this to be done, and surgeons will be a bit concerned that the K readings they have does not align with what was found before in the previous instrument. So they tend to fudge to make the error like transmitted through generations of instruments. That's very interesting. But again, I can understand that, because it's not science, it's achieving better clinical outcomes. But on the long run, this is not maybe the best strategy, because at some point, people will have to fix this. We all know that the 1.3375 keratometrics index value is probably leading to a overestimation of the keratometric power. And yet, it's still used in many biometers. Why? Because formulas of third and fourth generation were built with this value, and they are optimized for that. So if tomorrow you want to say, well, let's reanalyze this and maybe lower this value to better match the true keratometric power of the cornea, of the eye, then you may destabilize formulas, and that will not please doctors. So that's tricky. But when you work on the white page from the beginning, and that's what we've done with the PEARL-DGS formula, you can swing around those issues, as I explained, by using true TK estimation, just using anterior K readings, but getting rid of this keratometric index value and try to make your formula accurate with a better K reading and the K total K prediction value.
Damien, what's the answer? If everyone is fudging things and making generational errors, do we need someone to come up with an incredibly basic biometer that truly just measures and tells you the numbers and doesn't think about the outcomes? Is that where we need to go?
Ideally, yes, because as you know, that game where everyone puts like a stick of wood to make like a pile, and the last one that makes the pile first. Yeah, so when the pile goes on the left, you are tempted to put it more weight on the right, and that's exactly what we do now. But someone needs to come and say, hey, let's build a very aligned, nice tower, which can be very high and still will not fall down.
I could sit and listen to Damien explain things for hours, but it sounds like his kids have just come home, so we should probably let him go and get to work. But thank you both so much. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Damien, for joining me to discuss the updates to RayTrace.
Thank you.
I'll look forward to talking to you all again on the next Peer2Peer podcast. But for now, thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Ben.